All right, take it away, Salim.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's tech webinar, Intro to Microsoft Excel Part 1. My name is Salim. I will be serving as your host today. You may know me from our Writers Workshop series. We also have Susan Winkler, our technology librarian, helping out today. And teaching the class today is Library Associate Rebecca. Before I introduce Rebecca, I do want to give a few Zoom reminders. So there will be time built in for questions. If you have a question, you can type it in the chat. So the chat feature is located at the bottom of your screen towards the center. Next to that is the raise hand option. You can use that if you prefer to use your microphone, and one of us will unmute you and you can ask your question out loud. Other than that, Rebecca, unless I missed anything, I will turn it over to you to begin today's webinar.
Okay, sounds good. As Salim was saying, feel free to ask questions at any time during the webinar because that's what we're here for. We're here to help you answer the questions that you may have coming into the class or while we're teaching in class. So don't worry about interrupting us. Just put those messages in the chat or feel free to raise your hand at any time. So we can go ahead and get started. I will share my screen here so you can see the PowerPoint that we're going to cover. All right, let me expand this a little bit. Okay, I hope you're seeing my slide there. Let me enter my slideshow view. Are you seeing Intro to Microsoft Excel?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so again, this is part 1. So we're having part 2 next week. So we're going to dive into the introductions kind of stuff, and then we'll do some more advanced stuff next week. It's okay if you don't have Excel. A lot of people will take this class if they're interested in learning what it's all about. Maybe you work with it at your job and you want to learn more. So we kind of cater to every learning situation. So you might have already had experience or you're interested in starting it from scratch. So let's cover what we're going to talk about today. So of course, we're going to talk about Microsoft Excel. It's hard to say fast. The version we're covering today is the 2016 version, and that would be the same version that we have on the library computers. So if you're ever in the library and you want to work with Excel, you can get on one of our computers. We're going to talk about the organization of Excel and how to navigate. We're going to enter in some data. So I have a little example exercise that I'm going to use to enter data into Excel. We'll also learn about how to select and edit the data that we've entered. We're going to be able to move and copy that data as well. We're going to talk about formatting data. So we'll talk about how to change sizes, colors, fonts, stuff like that. All right, before I get started, does anybody have any questions?
And remember that if you have any questions, you can go ahead and post them in chat. Or if you want, you can raise your hand, we'll unmute you and you can ask your question out loud.
Okay, cool. So let's go ahead and flip to the next slide. There we go. All right, so what is Excel? Excel is Microsoft's spreadsheet software that will allow you to enter, sort, filter, calculate, and visualize data. So that also includes graphs and charts. We're really not going to cover too much with graphs and charts during this webinar, but there are things out there that I can point you to that will help with those. We'll talk about those later. So there are a couple different versions of Excel. Again, we're going to be working with Excel 2016, but there's also Excel 2019, and there's also an online Excel, and it's through Microsoft 365. So you may have heard of that before. That's Microsoft's online software platform. So you can work with things like Excel, you can work with Word. If you have an Outlook account, you have access to Microsoft 365 for free. So a lot of times if I'm working online, especially if I'm collaborating with Susan on a webinar like this, we'll work with Microsoft 365. It's super easy to use, but we're going to use the actual software, which is Microsoft Excel 2016. All right, so actually let me switch over so that we can just jump right into Excel and get started with creating a worksheet, or I'm sorry, a workbook. So let me stop my share. Now, of course, we're going to share out this handout as well. I am covering, and that will be in the email that's going to follow up when the recording is ready. But I think we'll also put the link in our chat so that you can have access while we're doing the webinar today. So let me stop my share, and then we're going to go to Excel. So let me actually open up Excel first before I share my screen. Okay. All right, I hope that you're seeing what I'm seeing, which is the start page for Excel.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so once you open up Excel, and of course, we're working with a Windows computer, but if you're working with a Mac computer, you may need to purchase Excel to have access to it. You'll probably need to purchase the software as well if you're working on a Windows computer. But once you open that up, you'll get access to a lot of different templates, which you can choose from, and those will help you get started if you're looking for a template, maybe to create a budget, or maybe you're trying to track some data, or maybe you're creating a calendar. There's a million different types of templates, but there's also a blank workbook, which will let you sort of create your own look, and it will let you sort of start from scratch without any preconceived design or functions entered in already. So we're just going to start with a blank workbook. So we're going to select that right here in the center of our screen here, blank workbook. So I'm going to double click on that. Okay, so now I hope you're seeing my workbook. It's blank. There's a lot of different cells in there and a lot of different tabs up at the top. All right, let me move this thing from Zoom. Okay. All right, so up at the top of Excel, you're going to see that green bar. And then it has a kind of a gray bar that has a lot of different icons and words and symbols in there. So this is referred to as the ribbon. If you've taken our Microsoft Word class, you've probably heard us talk about the ribbon as well. It's similar, but of course it's got the functions that have to do with Excel. So you'll probably see a lot of similarities, but you'll also see some differences. It has all of those tabs up at the top. So the ribbon is going to organize tabs, icons, and groups. So what's a tab? So the tabs are these words up here at the top left. You'll see a tab that says File, Home, Insert, Page Layout, Formulas, Data, Review, and View. Now, of course, if you're working with something, yours might look slightly different, but this is what mine looks like if I have a blank workbook open and I haven't started anything yet. So if you click on the tabs, that will actually let you kind of go to pages where you can see different functions, different icons. So these are going to help you do things on Excel. And once you start going through those tabs, you're going to notice that a lot of the things in the tabs are sorted into different groups. So the groups, again, those are going to have the icons in them, but they're going to be sorted into the same sort of similar functions. So let's go back to our Home tab up here in the top. And then you'll notice there's a bunch of groups here. So I have a clipboard group, and the groups, you'll kind of notice that there's a small gray kind of divider line. It may be a little hard to see on Zoom here, but you'll see a divider line that will separate those groups. And then underneath, you'll see the group name. So I see a clipboard group, I see a font group, alignment, number, styles, cells. And of course, those groups will change as I flip through my tabs. So for instance, if I'm on the page layout tab, my groups are different. They're themes, page setup, scale to fit, sheet options, and arrange. So those will also have those icons inside the groups. So the groups for fonts, it looks like, have different icons pertaining to what we can do with our fonts. So maybe we can make our font a different style or a different size, a different color, stuff like that. That will be grouped into that font group because that's what we're doing with that. And you'll also notice if you kind of hover your mouse right over one of those icons, Excel is going to pop up a window that's going to tell you what that icon is. So I have font color pulled up here, and it's also going to tell me what that icon will do. So of course, font color is going to let us change the color of our text, but I can also go over here to maybe this B here. That is going to let me make my text bold, and it's also showing me a keyboard shortcut. So that's kind of useful too if you're a big keyboard shortcut person. You can hover your mouse over that icon and see if there's a keyboard shortcut that you can use. Again, there's a bunch of different icons, but there's also something called a dialog launcher that is right in the bottom right corner of your group here. And the dialog launcher is going to let you do a little bit more than what is in your group right here. So for instance, if we click the dialog launcher for font, if I click that, that's going to let me do a couple more things in detail. I hope you're seeing that extra window pop up where it says format cells.
Yes.
Okay. So of course, in our font group, that's going to let us change our font, and it's going to let us change our size, and we can change our color. There's a bunch of different things in this particular group. Let me choose another one and see what it does. Let me do the clipboard dialog launcher. Okay, so that's not going to do very much. It's just going to pull up the clipboard. Let me try a different one. Let's do alignment. Okay, so this one, it gives us a number of options in terms of how we want our text to look, align. We'll talk about alignment a little bit more in a second, but again, that dialog launcher is just going to be kind of an extra menu within that group where you can do more detailed things. Any questions so far? I think that about covers the ribbon.
No hand raised yet and no questions in the chat just yet.
Okay. We're just sort of dipping our toes so far. Okay, there is some organization when it comes to how Excel looks as well. They've got things organized on the screen so that you can quickly get to different functions. So for instance, up in the top left corner, right above the tabs, you'll see a couple of icons there. So for me, I see a little save icon, which looks like a floppy disk. I hope you're seeing that up in the top left corner. It's a little small to sort of notice what it looks like, but it looks like a floppy disk. And then we have some arrows. So we have an arrow pointing to the left and an arrow pointing to the right. So those are going to help us do things like undo or redo. So maybe you made a mistake and you want to take the mistake away, you can hit the undo button. That helps me a lot because I'm a person that tends to make typos or click somewhere accidentally and insert something accidentally. So that's a helpful tool for me. And there's also a little tiny arrow that's pointing down right at the right up here. And this is helpful because it's going to let you customize what buttons are up here in your toolbar. So it's called the quick access menu, or I think is it the quick access menu? I'm pretty sure that's what it is. It may be the quick access toolbar, one of those two. Susan, you probably would know better. But this will let you customize what comes up in these icons. So for instance, I can add different icons to maybe open up a new spreadsheet or allow me to quickly print something or email something. That's just going to add another tool. So let's add in a print, preview, and print button and see what that looks like. Okay, so you'll now notice that I have another icon up here in our quick access toolbar. And this is really, again, going to customize your experience on Excel. That's what's kind of nice about this toolbar up here is you can make it work for you. So if you find yourself often hunting for something like how to create a new, or when you want to create a new workbook or printing often, feel free to add any button up in there because again, that's going to make your experience better. And of course, you don't have to have these up here like Excel has them. So maybe I wanted to take away a button. I could also do that by clicking it again, and then it would take it off of my list. You'll also notice down underneath all of the groups here are a couple of boxes. So I see a box that says A1, and then I also see a box next to it that has some icons, and then a big blank box. So this box that is labeled as A1, that is our box that is indicating what cell we have selected. So what I mean by cell is these little boxes here as I click around in the workbook. So these are the boxes where I'll enter in data. Excel calls them cells. It's the cells of your worksheet. So you'll notice as I click around that changes because I have a different cell selected. So now it's on D2 instead of A1. So if I move again, it's going to be B9, G2, F5. So you'll notice that change depending on what you have selected. And that's sort of a good way to navigate through Excel. So if you're working with someone on Excel and they're like, okay, go check out cell 8 or H10, and you can actually go in here and type in H10 and hit enter. That will bring you to that cell. So that may help you navigate as well, especially if you have a larger worksheet. That's going to be your friend. You'll also notice the formula bar up here. That's that big box. Now ours is a little different because we have it sort of scaled up. So yours might be smaller than ours, but this is where you're going to enter in any formulas you have. You can also enter in data in this cell. So let's go to A1 and I'm going to type test and see what happens. Okay, so you'll notice that in our formula bar here, it says test. So any data that you have that's in that cell is going to show up when you click on the cell inside of your formula box, if that makes sense. So if I click off of it into a different cell, it's going to be blank because I don't have that cell selected anymore. So sometimes it's helpful, especially if you're entering something long or complicated, to just use the formula bar instead of entering it down here in the cell. We're going to talk about entering data in a second, but it's useful to know the different things up here under the groups. All right, any questions so far? I know it's a lot of information so far.
No questions yet.
All right. You'll also notice that there are some icons in the top right corner. So we talked about the top left. Let's talk about the top right. So there's a few buttons here that you may have noticed in some other applications that you use on your computer. So for instance, the X button here on the top right, that's if we wanted to close out of Excel, we could hit the X button. That would close the application. So I would be careful if you're clicking around over here and not to accidentally hit that X button, especially if you don't have your worksheet saved. We're going to save our worksheet in a second once we start entering more information. There's also a button to the left of the X, which is called Restore Down. So currently we are fully expanded to the entire screen. But if you're clicking Restore Down, that will bring my window a little smaller. So that won't fill the whole screen. It will just look like a window on your desktop. I can't really show that too well on the computer, but if it doesn't say Restore Down, it will say Maximize or Full Screen. So that's how you get the Excel to be on your full screen. So you don't have any distractions. You're just working with Excel. There's also a minimize button to the left of that, which will help you hide the worksheet or put it down in your taskbar. So sometimes if you're working with another application or you wanted to just hide Excel for a second while you look at something else, you can hit minimize and that will put it down in your taskbar and you can get back to it later. That doesn't close it, it just hides it away so that you can check something else out or just hide it. Maybe you don't want to look at it right now. To the left of that is another Excel-based icon. I don't really see this icon too often except when I'm working with something like Excel or with Word. This is called the ribbon display options. So again, our ribbon is that big spot here that encapsulates all of our tabs and our groups, but this will let us change how we view that. So if I were to click on this, we have a couple of options here. I hope you're seeing those.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So we have this first option here is auto hide. So that will hide our ribbon so we can work on our workbook without seeing all of those icons and tabs. But you can get that back. You just need to hover your mouse. I don't think I can do it on Zoom without it doing something weird. Let me try it. Can you see that the tabs are hidden and all that?
Yes.
Okay. So you'll notice it's just going to show our formula bar and our cell number and these other icons here. It's not going to show all of those specialized tools and icons that we had before. Some people like that because it clears up some of the clutter. Personally, I like to see all the icons because it helps me. I don't have to keep constantly going up here and opening up the tab again. So I can get it back, but I have to click on those 3 dots. Let me do that again. Let's see if it'll do it. Here we go. I just clicked on these 3 dots up here and that showed all of my tools again. And then I clicked back to hide them again. Another option is to show the tabs. So that will just show the tabs, but not the groups. Of course, I'll see them if I click on the tabs, but if I wanted to hide it, I could click the tab again. And then the one that we have by default is called show tabs and commands. So that would be everything. And then as you're working, it's not going to hide anything. It's going to keep those all displayed. So that's something, again, that will help you customize your work experience. It's up to you how you want to do it. And you'll find as you work what works for you. And there's no right answer, really. It's just depending on how you like to work personally. Okay, let's talk about the bottom left corner, because there's a couple of things down here, bottom left. You'll see where it says sheet 1. So the cool thing about Excel is that you can have a workbook with multiple sheets. So maybe, for example, you've made a budget and you wanted to separate your budget into months. So maybe I have a 2022 budget and I wanted to separate it into January, February, March, etc. I could actually create all of those sheets down here by hitting the plus button. So I could do sheet 2, sheet 3, sheet 4, all the way until, as many as I wanted, really. And then I could rename them. All I have to do is double click. So let's do that. Just as an example, I'll do January since I was talking about a budget with months. Let's do February. And of course, you can always change these as well. So if you decide that you want to switch it from years or weeks, or really it could be whatever you want. I'm just using a budget as an example, but there's tons of different ways you can use sheets on Excel. And then of course you can flip through those by clicking on them. And you can delete them as well if you right click on it and hit delete. That will delete the sheet out of there. So yeah, I recommend kind of playing around with that and seeing how that works for you. I like to do sheets with my budget. That's why I use that as an example. It makes it really easy. It consolidates it into one workbook instead of having so many for each month saved separately. Makes it easy. There's also some icons at the bottom right-hand corner. You'll see them over here where my cursor is. So these 3 icons here are going to be your view options. So right now I have it on my normal view, but I can switch it to a page layout view or a page break preview. So we won't go into what those are really today, but if you want to, you can click on those and see how those look. So this is just going to separate them into our page layout view, which will kind of show them as if they were on one sheet of paper. So that might be helpful if you're trying to get something printed and you want to see how it looked on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, or, however you work. If you click on page break preview, I don't really know what this one is. I don't ever work in that one. Maybe Susan or Solemn have more insight, but I usually have it on the normal view. Of course, if you're working differently, you might have it on a separate view. And then you'll notice at the bottom, very bottom right, is a slider bar here. So the slider bar is our zoom in and zoom out tool. So if I were to click and drag this slider bar forward to the right, that's going to change my zoom. So it's not going to make it bigger as like when we go to print it. It's not going to change anything in terms of that. It's just going to change how it's displayed to you. So if you had a lot of information that you were looking at and you wanted to get into a more detailed view, you can use that slider bar to zoom in or zoom out. Maybe you wanted to zoom out and get a bigger view of what you had. So I use the slider bar pretty often because I don't like to squint too much or lean my head too far in. I like to make it big so I can see it, make it easy for myself. So you'll see here up at my test has gotten bigger because I've zoomed it pretty far in. It looks like it's at 243%. So that's pretty useful. You'll probably have noticed that if you've worked in Microsoft Word, there is a slider bar with that as well. And I think there's one with PowerPoint too. All right, any questions so far?
No questions yet.
Okay. So I'm going to keep mine kind of zoomed in because I like it.
Rebecca, we do have a comment.
Oh, sure.
For page break. If
Yeah.
you want to use page break, you can. It works the same way it does in Word, where if you want to make sure it's like forcing your stuff to stop at a certain point, and then being able to continue on the next page with new information.
Got it. It'd probably make more sense if that information entered.
Yes, yeah, and it's it also comes down to how much information, when you're going to print something, how much information you want to fit on one page, or if you want to kind of force it so that it can be on 2 pages so that it becomes more easy to read for someone when it's printed. So.
Gotcha. That's good to know.
Thanks. Yep.
I guess I don't work in Excel enough for me to switch out of normal view, but there's a lot of different ways to do things. All right, so let's talk about navigation. Let me switch back to normal view. So let me delete that test out of my cell here. So there is a way to navigate between the cells, of course, without clicking with your mouse. So it's helpful when you're entering information and you're doing it quickly to use your navigation skills. So there's a couple of different things you can do. So if you're wanting to navigate between cells using your keyboard, for example, you can use your arrow keys. So I'm using those directional arrows on my keyboard to move up or down or right or left. And of course, you can see as I'm moving that each cell that I've had currently selected is surrounded by that green border. And then you'll notice as well that the cell that I'm currently on is also sort of darkened in the column and in the row. So currently I'm on D2, and you'll see that D and that 2 are slightly darker than the other letters, and they're also green. So that's also an indicator that that's the cell I have selected. So you'll notice that is kind of helpful visually. I know sometimes if I have a lot of data on a spreadsheet, it's sort of hard to see where I am. So sometimes I'll look at those letters and numbers to see where I've selected. If you're entering data as well, you can hit, let me type something in. Let's do a test again. If I hit enter, that's going to pop me down to the cell right underneath it in my column. So I was in test. My test text was written in A1 and I hit enter and now it's in A2. So this is useful if maybe you're doing like a number. Let's do 1, enter, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I put in 3 again, 4. So that's kind of useful if you're moving really fast. You can just hit that enter on your keyboard. Let me delete all those out of there. If you want to move to the right, instead of going down, you can hit tab. So if you hit tab on your keyboard, that's going to move me to the right. And of course I can hit enter, but that's going to pop me back to the front. So in that case, if you were using tab and you wanted to go down, I would say use your directional arrow to move down. Again, you'll get used to this once you start using these buttons and you start entering your data. It makes more sense when you're practicing it, when you're using it a lot. But yeah, it definitely takes practice and you'll notice things as you start to go along. And of course, I could always just use my mouse if I wanted to. You don't have to use the keyboard to move around. All right. So when I talk about data, Excel, of course, has the ability for you to type in letters, numbers, names. You can also type in formulas. So Excel is really useful to do things like adding, dividing, getting averages. We're not going to delve into formulas today, but you can do more than just entering in text or numbers. So again, with that budget example, sometimes I will budget out like what I've spent on groceries for the month, and I'll do like weekly and I'll see how much I've spent per month, and then I'll average it for the year. So that helps me with my budget. Of course, there's tons of different formulas as well, and you've probably heard of a lot. You can get really simple or really complicated. So that's what's kind of nice about Excel. So let's actually go ahead and enter some data. I have an example spreadsheet that I'm going to draw off of for my data that I'm going to enter today. So we're going to do kind of pretty simple. We're not going to do a budget example. We're going to do a list for what we can bring to a summer picnic because it's going to start getting warmer soon and we got to make our plan. Okay, so let me enter some data. So again, if I want to enter data, all I would do is click on the cell where I want to start and then I could just begin typing. So again, I can either type in by double clicking on the cell itself, or I can select the cell and then go up to the formula bar and type in there. So there's two ways. One way is not right or wrong. It's just the way you prefer to do it and what's easiest. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to enter in a couple things here. So we're going to do our summer picnic list. And then we're going to have different categories. So it's going to be the people that are bringing things. So first name, last name. And you'll notice that as I'm typing, that some of the letters are kind of getting cut off there. We're going to talk about that in a second and why that's happening. Picnic category. Then we're going to have picnic item. Okay, so this is going to help me consolidate who's bringing what to my picnic so that no one brings like 4 bags of chips because we don't need that many. Okay, let me type in a couple names here. I'm just going to type in a few just so we get a feel for how this looks and what we can do with this data. But does anybody have questions while I'm typing in all of this info here?
Rebecca, while you're working on
yet. Sorry.
While you're working on that, I was just going to mention that next week in our Excel part 2, we will touch on some simple formulas and how to use them. And as a plug for library resources, we do have resources that we can point you to, both in book forms or with LinkedIn Learning or Gale courses, where you can learn more about advanced formulas and functions with Excel. So if you're interested in that, please reach out and let us know.
Yes. Of course, Excel is really cool because you can do so many things with it. Really get to the nitty-gritty of some of your data. Some people do amazing things with Excel and it really just blows my mind what you can do with it. Okay, I'm just going to fill in another one here. So when we hold this in person, we usually have everybody practice entering all of these themselves. So what we're going to do is we're going to send out this example so that you can try it at home when you're ready. Or of course, you can always come into the library. Why did I write main break? I must have been talking weird. Dish, main dish. And they're going to bring hot dogs. Okay. So you've probably noticed as I've been typing that a lot of the data is kind of bleeding into other cells or it is getting cut off. So there is a way that you can adjust your columns and your rows. So how do I do that? Good question. What you'll do is up at the top here, of course, maybe I want to expand this column A because I want to make sure I'm not cutting off where it says first name. And I also want to extend column D, column E, just so I can see what is in that cell. Because right now it says picnic cater, it doesn't say anything that makes sense to me. So let's go ahead and what we're going to do is we're going to hover our mouse right in between the column A and the column B. You'll see that line is separating them. If I hover my mouse over that, you'll see my cursor switch to one with an arrow pointing to the left and an arrow pointing to the right. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So that's an indicator to us that we're able to adjust. So we can adjust by clicking and dragging our mouse. And we're going to see how once I click and drag and let go, now I can see the full column there. Let me do that again with column D and column E. So let's click and drag. Okay. And it does take a little practice. You can move it back and forth too. It's not permanent. So these are able to be changed and customized. So you'll see my columns are expanding. I could also do my rows. So maybe I wanted to make my row a little wider. I can do that as well. Let me make these a little bigger. So that's helpful if you have a lot of data, especially with us, we have a kind of bigger list of things with our picnic items. So there we go. We've adjusted some of those. You can also adjust them by double clicking on that line. So let me make one small again and see if we can do that. So if I double click on that line instead of clicking and dragging, it will automatically size to where the end of my data is. So let's do that. There we go. I just double clicked it. Let me do it again. And again, it does take practice, but you'll want to make sure you get that icon that looks like the two arrows pointing in opposite directions. If you don't have that icon, that means you're probably not going to be able to adjust something. Of course, if you notice when I move my icon lower, it changes to a different icon. So that's not going to be able to adjust. Adjustments will happen only up here in this gray area. You can't really do adjustments if you're down here in terms of like your size. Let me try the double click and see what happens if I do that down here. Okay, no, yeah, it doesn't do it. It just thinks I want to do something with the cell. So again, your adjustments only with those letters up here at the top or the numbers in your left side here. Okay. And of course, I can always undo something. So maybe I accidentally adjusted it too large or too small, and I wanted to make it go back to where it was. I can just hit that undo arrow and it will restore it to where it was before. Let me expand this one too, because what's happening is with my text, if I'm writing, it's going to expand into that next cell if it doesn't have any data in there. But if I do have data, let's put in test and see what happens. Okay, if I do have data, it will cut it off. If I don't have data, it will just bleed over from the previous cell. So let me expand that. Let me delete that out of there now. Okay, any questions so far about adjusting cells, adjusting columns, rows?
No questions so far.
Okay. You may also notice when you're entering numbers in that there is something that happens if you have too many numbers in a cell. Let's do, for example, let's just type in a bunch of 8s here and see what happens. Oh, let me maybe do not so many. Oops, that's not enough. I'm trying to get it to do the thing I want it to do, and of course it's not going to. Huh, let me make it smaller. Interesting. There we go. Okay, that's what I wanted to see. I wanted to see these little hashtag or pound signs. So those are an indicator to you that you're entering data that the cell cannot display because the cell is not big enough. So if you're ever working in Excel and you see those numbers there, that just means that Excel is not showing it to you because it's just not a big enough cell. So if I adjust my cell, I can keep adjusting. Let's see if it will show all of them. Okay, I think I just typed in a bunch of 8s and it thinks it's 8 to the power of 13 for some reason. But it should eventually show. Let me just type in something else here.
So that is from the formatting that's already existing for that cell.
Oh, that makes sense. Here, let me see.
And we'll talk about that next week as well, about how to format your cells a little bit more so you can make it look the way you want it to look.
Let's see. Yeah, we'll talk about the formatting. But again, if you notice that hashtag happening, it's just because your cell is not big enough. So don't worry, you're not doing anything wrong. It's just the cell needs to be a little larger. All right. Let's talk about how to select cells, unless anybody has any questions.
No questions yet.
All right, everybody's sticking with me, good. Let's see here. So now we're going to talk about selecting. So that maybe means you want to select a range of cells and you want to do something with them. So let me delete some of this stuff I don't need. Let me expand this a little bit so I can see it. Okay, so selecting a range of cells is pretty easy. what you want to do is you want to click inside of the first cell that you want to select. So I'm going to go ahead. I want to select this whole little area here that I'm working with. So we're going to do that first. We're going to select summer picnic list. That's where I want to start. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and hold and drag my cursor over the cells that I want to select. And then I'm going to let go. So you'll notice that the cells I have selected are in gray here, but you'll notice the first cell is in white still. That's just telling me that it was the first one. That's where I started. So that's still selected. It's just not in the gray. You can also tell it's selected because it has that green line around it. So I have this green line that's surrounding all of my selection. So there's kind of two ways to tell, of course, the gray or the green line. So this is useful maybe if you wanted to move the data to a different spot, if you wanted to maybe copy and paste. So it's a pretty useful practice to do the selecting. It does take some practice, especially if it's a lot of data or if you're getting really detailed. So I recommend practicing doing the clicking and dragging. So again, all I would do is I would select where I want to start my selection, click and drag until I've covered everything I wanted to, and then let go of my left mouse button. It does take practice, so if you're not getting it the first time, that's okay. There's a lot of clicking involved. There is a way to select the entire worksheet. So it would probably take a really long time to do your selection if you had a lot of data. So it's useful to know how to select everything. So if you look up at the top left corner, right in the corner of your worksheet is a little kind of box with a triangle, a gray kind of triangle up here. So if I click on that, that's going to select everything for me. So if I notice now that my gray has expanded outside, let me zoom out so I can see my selection. My gray has extended to the entire worksheet. And of course, this goes into infinity. So these worksheets will go all the way to infinity on the right and all the way to infinity on the bottom. So this is selecting everything. So this is useful to know that maybe if you're printing something and you want to select something or move something, if you select the entire worksheet, that's going to select every single cell, not just those ones that you have written your data in. So keep that in mind when you're doing that. You may not want to select your entire worksheet. You may just want to select the data that you want. All right. Let's zoom back in because we want to get into our cell again. Let's go back here. Any questions about selecting?
No questions yet.
All right, cool. And again, it does take some practice. It takes practice for me. I am sometimes a little clumsy with my mouse and dragging and clicking. It does take a lot of mouse skills. So it's helpful if you want to make a test Excel sheet, and that way you're not worried about any of the data getting moved around or you're worried about losing it or something. Just create a test one and just practice in that. All right, so let's talk about how to edit the data within the cell. So we've entered in our data and maybe we want to get into the cell and edit it because maybe something has changed. Let's go ahead and do that. So let's select, we want to maybe change this phone number here. So how do I do that? What I'll do is I'll just select the cell by clicking on it once with my left mouse button. So now I've got that selected. So then what I can do is I can either go up here to my formula bar and change something. So maybe the number is not 1075. Let's change it to 1057. So then of course I could hit backspace and edit my numbers. I can move into the front. Maybe it's 123 555 1057. Or I could go back to my cell and I could double click and now I have my cursor down there and I could move with my arrows and change that if I wanted to. So it's pretty similar to Word. You'll just make sure you have your cursor where you want it and then make your changes. Once I'm done making my changes inside of the cell, I can hit enter. And of course, it's going to go down to the one underneath it, but now I'm finished with the one I was editing. Okay. You can also select whole rows or whole columns. So a row is going to be these numbers here. So a row goes from left to right and a column goes from top to bottom. So I kind of visualize it as a column, like a physical column in maybe like a Greek temple. Those are those big, tall, vertical stone pillars, right? So that's going to look like a column that goes up and down. That's how I remember columns and rows. Rows, of course, maybe like a row. I, for some reason, think about church pews, like rows of church pews, and I think of those as very horizontal. So that's how I remember a row. And you can select a row and select a column if you click on the letter or the number from this gray part up at the top. So I've clicked on the 3 because I wanted to select all of row 3. If I want to select all of column C, for example, I can click on the letter C and that will select that entire column. Again, it's going to select everything in that column, not just the data you've entered. So it will select everything in column C into infinity. Or in row 4, it will highlight every single thing in row 4, even the stuff that's outside of the data you've entered. So keep that in mind as well. I think it's pretty useful, especially if I am making an adjustment to something. I will select the row and then I'll adjust it from there. I can also use this to sort something or format something. So I use these selections pretty often if I'm working with a lot of data at once. All right, there is also a way to insert data. This is especially useful if you've maybe created a whole worksheet of something and you wanted to insert data in between stuff you already have entered. So maybe you wanted to insert another column or another row. So let's talk about how to do that. It's pretty simple. Let's insert another row because we want to enter more data. Maybe we have another someone coming to our picnic. So let's make another row in between Roberta and Gilbert here. So how do we do that? There's a couple of different ways. What we can do is we can right click on the row here if we're wanting to enter or insert a row, or we can right click on a column if we want to insert a column. So if you're inserting a column, it's going to be inserted directly to the right. If you're inserting a row, I believe, let me check, that inserts above. Yes. Okay. Let me do that again. Let me delete that. So what I did to insert the row right above Gilbert is I clicked on the row so that it was selected, and then I'm going to right click with my mouse, so my right button on my mouse, and then I see a window pop up here which will let me do a couple things, including insert. So if I click on insert, that's going to pop in that extra row right above where I wanted it. So again, if you want to make sure the row is going where you want it, make sure you're in the correct row. So if I want something right above Roberta, I can right click and hit insert. So that will be another row right up here that's blank. Let's do another column because maybe I wanted to add another item or something for our picnic. Let's do it right next to picnic category. Again, our column, it's going to be to the right. I'm going to right click and hit insert. Oh, I guess it is to the left. Huh, I thought it was to the right. Maybe that's on some other program that I use and I just, for some reason, thought it was Excel as well. Let me delete those out of there. So I guess your columns are to the left. Disregard what I said earlier. Of course, it's all trial and error. So I learned that because I made a mistake. So now I know. Now it's to the left. All right. And of course, you saw me deleting out a bunch. You can also do that too if you right click. It's right underneath insert. So I would be very careful when you're clicking around here not to accidentally hit delete. But of course, if you do accidentally hit delete, you can hit the undo button. Don't worry about it. All right.
Incidentally, I'm going to just add real quickly that edit undo, it'll take you back at least 5 steps in your process. So if you need to undo, you can do undo, enough times back too.
Mhm. Ours
So
goes pretty long.
Yeah.
If you see like next to the edit undo button,
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
small little arrow there that's going to show
Okay,
all of
that's more than you get, I think, with Word. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
That's
Excel,
your
since
entire
you're
history
probably
then.
doing so much.
Yeah, they must have changed that. That's great.
Yeah, it looks like
Yeah.
it went up to like 97
So like 70
or something.
Yeah. Okay, see, and I learned something new today too.
Yes. I think maybe because you're entering so much with Excel versus Word, it may just be like, okay, let's just give him a whole bunch of options.
Yeah. Excellent.
All right. So that is inserting. That's a pretty common one that I use. Inserting and deleting. Those are probably ones you're going to use pretty often, especially if you're constantly working with your data. All right, so let me make sure I didn't miss something here. Okay, no, I haven't missed anything yet. All right, do we have any questions though before I move on? Or I can show something again too. If you would like me to demonstrate something again, please let me know too, because sometimes I tend to get on a little flow and I don't realize how fast I'm going.
There is a question in the chat and they just said wrapping ?
Yes, we're going to talk about text wrapping in a little bit. And that will really help if you have a lot of data in a cell and you don't want to make it a giant, large space of your worksheet, especially over here where I have our picnic items. I have a bunch of items for this person that's bringing things to our picnic, and we're going to talk about how to wrap that text so it makes it into a smaller space. We will get to that, I promise. All right. So there is also a way to, I hope I answered that question for that person. We will get to it. There is a way to move things within a worksheet as well. So maybe you wanted to copy and paste something. Let's talk about that. So this is going to involve selecting things. Let me zoom out just a slight bit here so we can see a little more of our worksheet. Let me hide my controls. There we go. That's way easier now.
They did have a follow-up question, Rebecca.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
They said the dots to the right of column G, does that mean the right side of a page?
Yeah, so that will happen. It's sort of Excel's way of showing you what is going to fit on a piece of paper that you're printing. So if I scroll down, there should be one below as well. Let me see if I can see anything. Maybe not. It's going to the right here because I don't have any data down here for it to, I think, evaluate. But to the right here, that dotted line is going to be that print area. So it's kind of useful to use that as a guideline, especially if you're hoping to print your information. So for us, we're definitely going to want to figure out text wrapping, because if I print this, it's going to cut off my information. I hope that helps answer that question. All right, let's talk about moving stuff in a worksheet. So this is again useful if you wanted to maybe rearrange some stuff in your worksheet, or you wanted to maybe copy and paste information. I often do copy and pasting in Excel, and it's really useful to know how to do that. So there is a way. It's pretty similar to what we did with our selection. So let's go ahead and select something that we want to move. Let's move Gilbert to the top of our list, because maybe I wanted to have our list alphabetical and it will be easier for me if he's at the top. So what I'm going to do is, first thing, I want to select the data that I want to move. So how do I do that? Once again, you're going to click on that first cell that you want to select, and then you're going to click and drag it. So we want to select this from row 4. So I've got Gilbert Gordon and his address, phone number, picnic category, and picnic items. So that's what I want to move. So once I have my selection, then what I can do is I can just, do you see that where my cursor has changed? If I move my cursor down?
Yes.
Okay. So if I have my cursor in the middle of the cell, it kind of looks like a white cross. But if I move it down to the border of the cell, that green border, it's going to change to a cursor with arrows pointing in all 4 directions. So that, if I see that, Oh, go ahead.
Rebecca, I might
heard a
suggest using
question.
the slider to make it a little bit bigger down below.
Yeah, let me
People
try
might
that.
be able to see it a little bit better.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah, just
Can we
up
see
until
that
you get
border a
to,
little easier?
yeah, at least up until you get to the G. Yep, perfect. Thank
Okay.
you.
Cool, yeah. Whatever's easier. I know sometimes I'm really close to the screen, so it may be hard for other people to see what I'm seeing. Okay, so again, once we have that cursor that's pointing in all 4 directions, that's going to be an indicator to us that we can move if we click down. So if I were to click down on my mouse and drag, then I can move this. Do you see as I'm moving my cursor that this green bounding box is following my cursor? So that means I have that range of cells selected and I'm moving that. So maybe let's go ahead and move it up here above Roberta Wilkins. Oh no, I think I may have to move it to a blank spot or else it's going to overwrite that information.
Yep,
So
so that's also where you could use the insert new row
yes,
before you move it.
yes. This is
Practice
something I
skills you
often
already
forget
learned.
to do.
Yeah, or you will. You're exactly right. You'll override your title area.
So let me show that again so you can see that little error message that popped up. So if I were to click and drag this over another piece of data and let go, Excel is going to give me this error message that says there's already data here. Do I want to replace it? So Excel thinks that I want to just kind of place this on top, and it's just kind of warning me that, hey, do you want to do this? I don't, so I'm going to hit cancel. What I want to do is I want to get that in a blank spot right above that information. So let me try that again. Let me get my cursor. I'm going to move it to the blank spot and let go. Okay, so now it's moved. So now I have my list more alphabetically laid out like I like it. But this is helpful too if maybe I wanted to move it down a couple of rows. I can go, oop, see, I didn't do it right. I got to get my cursor correct. There we go. Maybe I wanted to move it to row 8, then I could go down here and fill in more information for other people that are coming to my picnic. So this is useful if you wanted to quickly move stuff around and not having to type in a bunch of information again. This is super, super useful, and I recommend practicing moving that around, practice your mouse skills, and make sure that cursor has those arrows in all 4 directions. Now, again, you'll probably make a few mistakes like I did. It's just all about learning what to do next. So I could either use my undo button or I can move it back to where it was. It's just up to you and how you like to work. All right. I can also copy the selection as well. So maybe I wanted to just duplicate this information and move it to a different area. Let me zoom out just slightly. So what I will do, of course, is I'm going to select my data. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the control button on my keyboard. And I'm going to, do you see how that cursor changed to an arrow and a tiny little plus there? That means I have it selected to copy. So then I could drag it to the place I wanted it to go and let go. And now it's just copied that data. So that's kind of useful if you want to duplicate stuff. I don't use that one very often, but it is useful if you have a lot of information and you don't want to have to keep typing stuff over and over again. Okay. You can also cut and paste, of course. We can cut and paste in Word and we can cut and paste in Excel. It is a slightly different process, so let's cut and paste something. What do I want to cut and paste? Maybe I want to, do I want to do a whole row or do I want to just do one cell? Let's cut and paste. Here, let me delete this because this is going to confuse me. I'm going to delete that. Let's cut and paste these names here. Let's put them farther down. So what I'm going to do, of course, is select the cells I want to cut or paste, or I'm sorry, copy, cut or copy. So the difference between cut and copy is that cut is actually taking the data out and replacing it into a different part of the worksheet. Copy is just going to help you duplicate something. Sort of similar to Word. it's going to move it to a different spot wherever you have it pasted, but it depends on which one you use. So let's try them both and see what they both do. Okay, so first let's cut. So I'm going to select my data, and then I'm going to right click, and then I can hit cut up here from the right click menu, or I can also hit cut up here in the clipboard group up at the top. So I'm in my home tab and I can hit cut or copy. Let's do cut first. So you'll notice as soon as I hit cut that there is now this sort of marching ant border that has appeared around the selected data. We call it marching ants. I think that's the most apt description of what this is. So that's telling me that currently the data is cut and I have to decide now where it's going to get pasted. So let's paste it into a different part of our worksheet. So what I'm going to do now is select where I want it to go. So this corner here that's white, if I select one cell, that's where that data is going to start its paste into. It'll make more sense when I hit paste. So I can hit paste right here from the keyboard, or I can right click on the cell and hit paste. There are some paste options I have as well. I think, let me see. No, this one doesn't give me any paste options. I think it depends on the type of data, but if I were to just hit paste, then it would paste my information that I cut.
Yeah, usually paste special happens when you have formulas and functions.
Okay. That makes sense. So we're just doing text, so it's not going to give us that many options. So you'll notice that it's now no longer under where I had it before. Since we cut it, we actually kind of physically cut it out of the paper and moved it to a different spot, as if we would do in real life. Let me move that back. So I'm going to select my data. I'm going to hit cut. I'm going to select where I want it to go. And then I'm going to hit paste. And now it's back where I had it before. Of course, you can do this with a large worksheet or even just a cell. So maybe if I wanted to just cut this cell and move it into a different cell right underneath, I could do that. So you can get pretty detailed with what you do. If you're going to do copy, it's going to keep that data there. And when you paste it, you're just going to duplicate it in a different spot. So let's try that. Let me copy this. And then we're going to paste it. So you'll see my data is still down there. And I could paste it again too if I wanted to, because once we copy it, it's still on my clipboard. So again, another difference between cut and copy is that cut is sort of a one-time deal, but copy, as long as it's still on your clipboard, you can keep pasting. As long as I have those marching ants, then that means that is still selected and it's still on my clipboard. Let me delete those out of there. I don't need all those addresses. Okay, so it's kind of fun to play around doing copy and pasting and see how it works. It does take a little practice again to figure out where things go once you hit that paste button. So don't beat yourself up if it's not right the first time. All right, any questions about cutting and pasting?
Nope, no questions in the chat, no hands raised.
Okay. So next thing we're going to cover is formatting. So formatting is another way to customize how your worksheet is looking. So for us, I think our list looks a little bland and it may be a little hard to read, especially once we add more data in. It might be hard to differentiate some of the stuff that we've entered. So let's format it so that I can see it a little bit better and it's more legible. So in our font group, of course, that is in our home tab. So you'll see up here at the top left, we have our font group. This is going to let us change our font color, our font size, if we want it bold, italicized, underlined. There's a couple of other things you can do in terms of filling the box or the cell with color, and the actual font, you can change the color as well. So let's make our little title up here. Let's change that so we can see that a little better. So let's make that bold. If I want to make all of the data in this cell bold, what I'll do is just select the cell. Again, you'll click on it, and then I can hit the bold button up here in my font group. And now it's bolder. Maybe I want to make it a little larger too. I can hit the A with the up or A with the down, or I can select the size from our drop-down menu. Maybe I wanted to make it like pretty big there. Okay, so now I've got my font bigger. Let's also change our font. Let's see, maybe we wanted to do something fancy. Ooh, script. There's so many fonts in here. It's similar to Word, so you have a lot of selection. Let's do that. That looks nice. Okay, so our fonts up here we've changed. Of course, our other fonts are still the default that Excel had because we haven't changed those. Of course, we could go in and change the entire thing. If you did select all, I could go back to Calibri if I wanted to. So that's kind of nice with the select all to be able to change the entire format of the whole workbook. Or of course you could do just your selection that you have. Let's go back to that fancy type. I don't even know where it is now. There we go. Okay. So that's how we do our formatting of just a simple cell box. Let's also make the titles up here a little larger. So to change all of these at once, it's easier for me. So I'm just going to select all of them, and then we're going to make them, let's make them underlined, because that will help me read them a little bit better, and make them slightly larger. Let's also change the colors. So let's maybe make it, oh, I know what we're going to do. We're going to really make it stand out. We're going to do our background in blue and our text in white. So that'll really help me read that. It's kind of fun to play around with what you can do with these. So I recommend kind of playing around and seeing what looks best for you. Now, keep in mind that when you print these out too, it may look slightly different than it does on a computer, maybe harder or easier to read depending on what you're doing with it. All right. Yes, I did font size and we did bold. Let me also do those in italics because sometimes that helps them stand out as well. There we go. Italicized. So italicized has just got that kind of slanted look to it. It's a pretty similar thing to what is happening with your Microsoft Word programs. We also did font color and we did the fill. There's also something right next to the bold, italicized, and underlined. It's this sort of square with these dotted lines here. This is going to let you change how the borders on your cells are. So currently we don't have any border on our cell, but maybe I wanted to make a border on these title icons here. Let me make that no fill. So let's select our titles here. And let's just select a border. So currently we're with no border, but if I were to select one from this drop-down menu, let's do thick outside borders. Let's see what happens. Okay, so it looks like it's giving me a thick black line. It's maybe a little hard to see. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. It's got a thick black line around that group of cells that I selected. And it might be easier if I do one down here too. See how that looks? Yeah. So this one down here, for example, I did just so you could see what it looks like. And I recommend playing around with these two. Sometimes if you select multiple cells, and maybe I selected this and I wanted to do all borders, then it's going to put a border around every single cell. Sometimes it's useful if you do that because it might help you differentiate the data that's in each cell and make it easier for you to read. I can take away the border if I click on no border, then it goes back. So Excel has that kind of grayed out lines between the cells, but that's just sort of a way to help you read them. When you go to print it out, if there's no borders, you won't see those lines. So keep that in mind too. If I add the border, then the line would show up when I print it. All right. Let's also talk about the alignment group, because that's going to deal with things like text wrapping, like we had talked about earlier. It's also going to deal with things, how things are positioned within the cells. So let's talk about the top, middle, and bottom alignment. So if we look in our alignment group, up here at the top, these three icons, there is a top align, a middle align, and a bottom align. So let me make one of these cells a little bigger so that we can see what happens when we do that. Let me zoom in. Okay, so let me click on Roberta and see what happens if we click on top align. Okay, so Roberta has now gone to the top of the cell. If I click middle align, it's in the middle of the cell, and it was defaulted to the bottom align, so it would be at the bottom of the cell. There is also an alignment that will help you align it within the cell left, right, or center. So that would be in these three icons directly below. So currently it's in the align left. If we do center, that will bring it to the center. Or if we do to the right, it's going to align it to the right. So I kind of like to mess around with these and make it look a little fancier. Maybe we want to get it in the center, looking nice. So that's just another way to customize how you're looking at your data and how it's organized, maybe to make it more legible. So I recommend kind of playing around with those buttons, see what they do and see how it works for you. I like to use the alignments pretty often. I like the center align myself. But again, it's up to you. All right. Again, that was the alignment group.
And Rebecca, this might be a good time if I can mention, this might be an opportunity where you want to select the entire row or the entire column, because again, like you mentioned earlier, with formatting, if you want to change all the cells to be formatted the same way, this is a good opportunity to make it happen across the board.
Yes, let's do that. Let me actually enter in another thing in our list so that we can see what happens if we do that, like you were saying, Susan. Let's see. Do we have any questions while I'm typing in information?
I don't see any hands raised or new comments in the chat.
Cool. We are bringing another dessert. I mean, what's a picnic without dessert, right? Apple
now
pie,
I'm hungry again,
delicious.
even though I've already had lunch. All this dessert
right.
talk is making me hungry for some cookies or something.
Who knew Excel could bring that out in you?
Yeah.
All right, so you'll notice since I entered the new information, it has kind of gone back to that default that Excel has. It didn't have those things that I did to the other cells. So like Susan was saying, if we do the selection for the entire cell, I can of course click at the top and then make my changes from there. So I can maybe make them middle aligned. Now keep that in mind that it really will change everything. So you see now my summer picnic list has kind of gotten all weird because I did the center align. Let me make that left align again. Center. Let me make this a little bigger. And this one a little bigger. And this also applies to if you're adjusting something. So if I were to select a full column or a full row and then do an adjustment, it will do the adjustment for everything. So let me try it here. Will it? No, I don't know. What was I meaning? There we go. I think that was for the full worksheet once I had that selected. Yeah. Okay. So if I just wanted to do these three pieces of data here, I would just select those and then adjust it from there. Maybe I didn't want to mess around with my title bar here. I wanted to keep it where I had it before. I could do that. So it does take a little fiddling to make it look the way you want it to. Maybe I wanted that center aligned and this one center. Okay. And we're going to talk about how to get this data in there so that we can read it. Let me make that center line again. Center, there we go. Sometimes it looks a little wonky if they don't all look alike, but that's just me being detail oriented. There we go. Okay, now they're all center aligned.
Often very good quality with Excel.
Yes,
because it is a
definitely.
very detail oriented program.
Yes, it is. Very, very detail oriented. Okay, so let's talk about that wrap text. So we touched on it earlier because we had a bunch of this data entered, but it was kind of bleeding outside of our cell and getting cut off, especially now that we've done our alignment. So if we're in our alignment group, again on the home tab, and we have this option up here that says wrap text. So it says wrap extra long text into multiple lines so you can see all of it. So that's super useful if you have, again, a lot of data in there and you want to make sure that you're able to read it. So I have my cell selected that I want to use wrap texting with, and then I'm just going to click wrap text. Okay, so now it looks like it's still cut off, but what I can do here is I can just expand my, adjust my row there, and now it's expanded so that I can see the whole thing. And let me go back actually too and mention something. It may seem like this has kind of occupied 2 cells, but it actually hasn't. Especially with words, they tend to bleed into other cells, and it may trick you, and you may think that you're down into this next cell, but we're currently in F4. And again, you can tell by clicking on the other cell next to it, and it's got no data in our formula bar. But if I go back to F4, it's got everything that I entered. So keep that in mind too, if you're adjusting things and moving stuff around. If you have text bleeding, then it's going to be centered into one text, but it may be displaying in another, if that makes sense. You can also merge cells together. So if you did have a lot of data, but you wanted it to be in more than one cell, you can select multiple cells and merge them together so that they're combined into one, and then you have more space to work with. So for instance, maybe we did want this data to kind of flow across 3 cells. What I can do is I can select those 3 cells. So I'm going to select my cells, and then I can hit this merge and center icon here. So that's a good way to kind of get everything into a bigger space. Maybe you had more data. I do this pretty often at work, just because we sometimes enter a lot of data into these worksheets, and we want to make sure that we're not constantly adjusting things and throwing off our other columns or rows.
I do it a lot with titles too in Excel workbooks.
Yes, and we're going to do the title too in a second too, so you can see that as well. But this now is in, it's expanded our cell into a bigger area. It's not bleeding, it's actually combined with these other ones here to make one giant cell. And of course, I could still do wrap text. So now I've got my text wrap and my merge and center. Let's do that with the title list, because the title list is still in one cell. So if we were to enter in more information, it would kind of not exist in that look anymore. So if I did, for instance, test, so now it's cut off my title. But let me delete that out of there. Let's go ahead and make our title this whole big cell up at the top so that it covers everything. So I'm going to select where I want it to be, and we're going to hit merge and center. And now you'll see that my title here, Summer Picnic List, is the center of this cell. And you'll notice there are no longer those dividing lines either. You'll see our dotted line, that's our printing line, but I don't have those regular dividing lines like I do with the other data here. And you'll notice the same with the food here down in this cell. I don't have these divider lines. So that to me is an indicator that this is a large cell that has been combined. And of course, if I click on it again, this merge and center button will be highlighted. I hope that makes sense. once you start practicing with Excel and you do these types of things, you'll understand how they work better. It's really all about getting your hands on it and figuring out for yourself all the ins and outs of all these buttons that you're pressing. All right. There is also a way to change the orientation of your text. So it's helpful sometimes to make your text go vertically rather than horizontally, and there is a way to do that. That is also in your alignment group. So maybe we wanted to have our first name here. We wanted to make this text vertical. How do we do that? So up at the top in our alignment group, we have an orientation button. So that is this little button that looks like letters A and B with an arrow kind of pointing to the top right. If we click on that, that will bring up this drop-down menu where then we can select how we want our text oriented. So if we wanted to say vertical text, let's click on that. And let's expand our window to see if we can see what it's doing here. Okay. So it looks like our text is now from top to bottom instead of from left to right. So this is sort of useful if you want something maybe at the very edge of your list to run all the way up and down and it was easy to read, you could make it that vertical text. Let's try another way and see what happens. We can rotate text up, so that will kind of make it like the spine of a book. We can do it the opposite way too. We can do it down. We can do it slanty ways. That's fancy. I've never really used that one, but I think that might be useful maybe in the corner of a workbook. I don't think I've ever really seen someone use it like that. I guess I don't work with too many workbooks that may have that, but I bet there is a bunch out there that do that. So yeah, there's a bunch of different things you can do with text orientation. Of course, if I wanted to get it back to where it was, I could just, is there a way to do that from here? Or do I just have to go to undo? I guess I'll just have to undo it. I think I can also clear the formatting. Let me see what happens if I hit clear. No, that'll take my colors away. Huh, is there a way to get back to the horizontal, you know? Center, huh? I guess I would just hit the reverse arrow.
Yeah, or use the dialog box, or when you do clear, you can do clear formatting, but it depends on how many steps you've taken in the future.
Yeah, it will take all of my colors out. So if I did clear formats, it takes all my colors and text stuff.
Yep. So that's why, yeah, I would say with the edit undo, as far back as you want to go, or the dialog box for formatting.
Let me see if I can figure out how to do it in the dialog box. Let's see, vertical text, alignment.
And then text alignment there, where it says horizontal and center. And your, and then the text direction should get you back.
There we go.
Yeah.
It does take some fiddling. I don't do this very often, so it's about trial and error sometimes.
Yeah. And usually there are multiple ways to do things too, so.
Yes, especially with Excel. All right, I know that was a lot in that little group there. Does anybody have questions about formatting text or aligning text?
Nope, I don't see any new questions.
Okay.
Yet.
And a lot of the aligning and formatting comes into play most when you're printing, because you want your things to be legible and maybe you want it to fit all on one page.
Right.
So it becomes something that you can use to tweak things so that you can make it legible, but also fit how you want it to fit.
Yes, like for instance, now I'm trying to squeeze this all into this one so it's not cutting off for my printing. Let me see, maybe I may have to lower the text size. There we go. So now that's all going to fit there on a print. And usually if I go to file, print, that's also going to help me show like what it's going to look like when I go to print it. So that may be an assistant to you when you go to figure out what may be cutting off or staying in your document when you go to print it. I just remember that I did not save this. So let's go ahead and save something. I recommend doing this before you do all your data. So that was a mistake on my part by not saving it right away. So let's go ahead and save this. We'll do File, Save As, and then I'll go ahead and do Test Workbook. You may not be able to see the little box that popped up, but I'll go ahead and do Test Workbook as my title, and I'm going to hit Save. And now you'll notice up at the top, I hope you can see the top of my worksheet says Test Workbook.
Yes.
Okay. So usually when you open a new Excel sheet, like a blank workbook, it'll say book 1, I think, or workbook 1, something like that. That's just the default before you save it and make it what you want it to say. Yeah, I recommend doing that before you get started. So you don't lose any data if you're going along, and you're making sure you're saving every once in a while so that you don't have to lose any data or have to re-enter something. Saving first and then saving often, that's going to be a really good habit to get into. I know there have been every once in a while times where I have lost some data because I have not saved it, and maybe my computer got unplugged or it died because the battery was low or the power went out. So it is not fun having to re-enter all that information or potentially losing something. Okay, I think that pretty much covers it for the demonstrations today. And I can pull up something again, demonstrate something again if there are any other questions. All right, no questions. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my PowerPoint because there's a couple of additional resources I wanted to highlight.
A question did just come through, Rebecca.
Oh, great. Perfect.
They're asking, how would you turn this info into labels?
Good question. I think there is something, I know there's something on Word called mail merge. Does that exist on Excel? Susan, do you know?
So you
Or
can take your Excel list or people's names and addresses and stuff, and you can import that into Word using mail merge to then create labels that you could print. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit more advanced than what we're covering today. But again, we could send something in the follow-up email with the instructions of how to do it. I know for several years my family has done a holiday newsletter, and we will buy those Avery labels and then do a mail merge from an Excel spreadsheet where we have everybody's addresses, and then then we don't have to address them everyone single. And my handwriting isn't very good. It
saves a lot of time.
Yeah, and my handwriting not good. I get mail returned to me. So yes, we can send that in the follow-up email. It does take a little tweaking for how you format it in your Excel document so that it'll work. So yeah, we can send that.
Yeah, it is more of an advanced topic.
Yeah.
Unless you do it pretty often, then you probably wouldn't know off the top of your head.
Yeah. And I was gonna say also that we could check and see if there's a LinkedIn tutorial for how to do it as well, because there probably is.
Yes, I think it's a pretty commonly asked question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they said they'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, we can definitely send that. Yep, I wrote it down on my list over here. I usually write down all the questions I want to follow up with, and that's going on the list. All right, let me switch back to, let's see if I can figure out how to do this now that I've hidden my Zoom thing. Nope, that's not it. There we go. Let me stop my share. Let me go back to Excel here. It's probably going to make me jump a million. Yeah, it is. Okay, bear with me as I flip through all of these. So again, we're going to have this handout in the email. So that's everything I've covered today in terms of our demonstrations. And that link that we put into the chat as well will be this handout. And we like to get really visual too. So hopefully these visuals will help you if you're following along at home. Okay. So additional resources we like to include as well in case you wanted to do some stuff on your own after class. So we do have a Gale Courses subscription through the library. So if you have a Champaign Public Library card, you have access to classes that you can take, including Introduction to Microsoft Excel 2016. So I think that's a like 4-course class that you can take.
Yeah,
it's a crash course on Excel.
There's beginner, intermediate, and advanced.
Okay.
With Gale Courses. I've taken them, so I can say that for sure. They do focus a little bit on the formulas and functions as well. So if you're interested again in more in depth about, creating like how to find out an average or things with, budgetary things like what's, to figure out the principal on a loan or things like that. They do have that kind of stuff in there.
Yeah, the thing that we usually like to say with our classes is we like to kind of give you the tools to start off with so that for instance, how do I enter something into a cell? What happens if I click on this button or that button? And then these tools will sort of be a foundation for you to then take the next step into doing things like graphs or formulas. So we won't cover every single itty bitty bit of Excel because that would be probably a 4-week course. But we'd like to kind of give you the foundation by using the examples. Like for us, we did the little picnic example. We have in the past done the budget example, but we felt like for what we were doing, it might not be as easy over a webinar. We are hoping to go in person eventually with Excel, so keep an eye out for that. But I also put in some links to LinkedIn Learning. LinkedIn Learning is great. Again, if you have a Champaign card, you can access courses online, including Microsoft Excel. There's all types of classes on software and hardware as well, even on just like learning how to do business things, job searching, resume stuff, all types of things on LinkedIn Learning. And then there is another site that's really useful called GCF Learn Free. We often talk about that with different, like for instance, we had our intro to the internet. There's stuff out there on how to do keyboard and mouse skills. And of course, Excel is one of those. There's also a link to keyboard shortcuts for Excel in case you're interested. Maybe you're a keyboard shortcut person. There's a whole list on that as well. And we also have a book a librarian service. So if you're interested in sitting down one-on-one with a staff member and you're interested in getting a specific question answered, or you need some one-on-one help, you can book that through champaign.org/book-a-librarian. Or you can feel free to call or email us and we can help you fill out that form that way as well. The really cool thing about these webinars is they will all go onto our YouTube channel. So we have a bunch of our old webinars up on there. And of course, once this one is ready to go, it'll go up on YouTube. And what's nice about that is you can slow down, go at your own pace, pause it, reverse it, and work on some of the activities while you're doing that. I really recommend YouTube to people who want to go and revisit a class, maybe take it again. I know we throw a lot of information at you, so it's really nice that we can say, hey, just go check out YouTube, take the class again, maybe brush up on your skills again. So that's a really super useful resource. And then next week, we have Microsoft Excel Part 2. And then at the end of the month, we're having Microsoft PowerPoint Part 1 and Part 2 as well. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up on our website, champaign.org/events. Of course, you can always call or email us too, and we can help you sign up. That's pretty much it from me. Unless there are any questions, I have my information up here as well. So you can always feel free to reach out and ask any question you might have or clarify something. I have my email and my phone here. And of course, any of our staff members here will be able to help as well. We'll do our best to get your question answered. That's what we're here for. So if you have it, please ask. Is there anything else anybody would like to ask, or I can show something again as well? I know I did a
Rebecca,
lot of demonstrating.
do you mind showing the tech workshop web on the website for people to sign up for the monthly message if they'd like?
Yes, let me get on to, okay, let me share my screen. Okay, I hope you can see the library's website there.
Yes.
All right, so on our website, you can get signed up for the monthly message, which will help you see what is coming up in terms of our tech workshops. So if we click on adults here up at the top of our screen in this sort of blue bar here, then we get another blue bar comes right underneath, and we have a tech workshops option here. We're going to click on tech workshops. Or of course, you could go to champaign.org/adults/tech-workshops, and that will get you to this page as well. And then you'll notice off to the left-hand side here, you'll have the option to sign up for our monthly email. And that'll give you sort of a smattering of what we have going on coming up. And you can sign up for the classes that way as well. So that'll give you a sneak preview of what's coming up.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you can scroll down here too and see what's coming up. So even after March, we're going to be getting into some of the in-person programs. So in April, we're going to kick off with a webinar for the first week, but then we're going to transition into some in-person workshops. Now, we're not completely eliminating the webinar. There will be a few webinars here and there monthly. So you'll still see us virtually, but we're getting back to in-person. So that'll be an exciting new start for that as well. And you can see us in person.
Yay.
Yay.
Speaking of seeing us in person.
All right, let me stop my share here. Does anybody have any questions? Again, I'm happy to show something again or demonstrate or whatever you need.
The last comment just says, great job. And I agree.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Even
Yes.
for staff, I consider myself, somewhat well-versed in Excel, but there were some things you demoed that I was like, I've never used that function before. So there's always something to learn, which is cool.
Absolutely. And like I said, I learned something new today about the how far back the undo can go in Excel.
Yes.
Which I guess is good because it means I haven't had to go back that far yet, but it's good to know that I could.
What's cool too is I remember when we were still in person before the shutdown happened, people would come up and say, well, I used to do this and it would take me like 12 steps, but the way you showed me, I now only have to do 3 steps. Yes. So there's, like Susan, like you were saying, there's always sort of another way to do something. And if we can get it streamlined for you, that's helpful.
And that's one of the cool things about that quick access toolbar, and like why I like to include that at the beginning, because if you normally wanted to, do something, a lot of times it takes, 5 or 6 clicks. But if you put the icon right up there in that quick access toolbar, you get it in one. So It's good to know that exists and be able to utilize it if you can. So yes.
All right. Well, I don't see any more comments. Someone just said I learned a lot, and she also is a regular Excel user. So
nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank everyone for coming, and we'll see everyone next week.
Bye.
Bye.